Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name's Tom Hedegard. Last week, scientists from South Korea and Russia signed an agreement on joint research intended to recreate a woolly mammoth. The animal last walked the Earth 10,000 years ago, but scientists say they can use cells from the remains of a mammoth found in Russia's melting permafrost to bring the extinct mammal back to life. And to continue the discussion surrounding animal and human cloning, I'm joined in the studio by Barbara Prainsack, Professor of Sociology and Political Bioscience at Brunel University. Also in the studio is Joyce D'Silva, former CEO of Compassion in World Farming. And on the line we have Dr. David Whitehouse, a science journalist and author, as well as Dr. Panayotis Zavos from the Andrology Institute of America. If I could start with you and just ask you to explain the science behind cloning, what's involved, and also how difficult it is.
Well, normal reproduction involves male and females, and they both provide half the genes for the offspring. The female produces an egg, and the male produces a sperm, and they come together and produce a cell, which then grows and turns into an embryo, and then turns into the young of the species involved. Cloning involves producing a new animal, a new individual that is genetically identical to the animal being cloned. Now, in nature, you do have clones quite naturally in terms of twins, and you can take embryos from bulls and split them and produce clones that way. But the new technique that scientists has been using is to actually use an empty egg cell and take genetic material from the individual, the animal wanting to be cloned, and place that inside an empty egg cell of which the female genes have been taken away, the female's contribution of genes has been removed, and somehow stimulating that to grow to produce a new individual. And that's been done in many species. And although it is a difficult technique, it has many, many problems. There have been many successes.
Can I just interject here? Because sometimes the cell from the female, the kind of receptor cell, if you like, is taken from an animal at a slaughterhouse, but sometimes it is extracted surgically from a living animal. And I just think that's a sort of animal health and welfare consideration we need to take into account.
Yes, I think there are all sorts of safety, health, welfare, regulation, quality standards, implications that follow such a controversial and fraught with problems technique like this. But it has been established as being something that does work on many occasions, and therefore it gives us a lot of information about how cells develop and become individuals. But it's got great implications, I think.
Can I just say also, I mean, the latest study just came out recently from Japanese scientists, and they said that, the success rate appears to be still around sort of 10% of cloned embryos are implanted.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yes, which is a very poor rate, and of course there are a huge number of spontaneous abortions, and also, particularly with cattle, a lot of cloned embryos grow very large in the uterus. So then there are either very difficult births or the animal has to have a cesarean. So yet again, there are more sort of animal health and welfare problems.
I think the thing I draw from this is that we are at the start of understanding the cloning process by this method. And as you say, you're quite right. There are all sorts of problems, animal health and welfare issues, and it is a very, in one sense, inefficient technique, and it's not something that should be done without due regard to the problem.
I may say, I don't want somebody to think that there are no problems in anything that we do. There are problems everywhere you go. I've been involved in the reproductive medicine for 37 years, and I must tell you, even when people reproduce naturally, there are problems, okay? We do not see those problems because those problems are not seen. They are just not viewed properly. I mean, every time a woman gets pregnant, that doesn't mean that delivers a healthy child. Every time a woman gets pregnant, it miscarries or gets reabsorbed or whatever, and therefore there are problems everywhere. We see more problems with the in vitro aspect of it because we grow things in a petri dish, we transfer them in women, we monitor those pregnancies quite critically, and therefore we're able to see more problems that way than the natural way when the lights go off in the middle of the night in a bedroom and somebody gets pregnant. Therefore, I don't want the people to think that there are no problems in natural conceptus and natural reproduction and sexual reproduction, etc. It's just that we see more things now because we see things more under the microscope than we used to.
And just a reminder, you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London, and today we're discussing cloning. And I'm joined in the studio by Barbara Prainsack, Professor of Sociology and Politics of Bioscience at Brunel University, Joyce D'Silva, former CEO of Compassion in World Farming. On the line we have Dr. David Whitehouse, a science journalist and author, as well as Dr. Panayotis Zavos from the Andrology Institute of America.
Dr. Zavos, can you tell us what you have done and what your success rates were and why you have done it?
Well, the success rate of creating embryos in a human is we started, as you realize, with Dolly the sheep, which was less than 5%, and then we were able to improve the efficiency to 50%. If you give me 10 eggs, I can create 5 clone embryos in the human. Therefore, the efficiency improved significantly. And we need to improve that even more now because we're learning how to become better mechanics. And you know, when you say that we have the large offspring syndrome in the cattle and we have a lot of problems, when I was asked in front of the Congress what seems to be the problem, the evidence of that is that I think there are too many mechanics are trying to do things that they don't know how to fix the car, and therefore we have problems fixing the car.
I think some of us would be really unhappy with the comparison between humans and cars, but apart from that, of course, creating cloned embryos and having a, as you say, high success rate there is not the same as producing a healthy baby. So can you tell us something about what your plans are there?
You mean creating a clone embryo, creating a clone human?
Yes.
Well, I think that we've been able to create up to 25 or 30 human clone embryos for reproductive purposes that we documented and we published. Subsequently, we transferred embryos in 5 women with the idea of getting a pregnancy established. Now, we have not been successful, and I know why we have not been successful. I think we transferred embryos in postmenopausal women because they happen to be the women that they wanted to have clone embryos produced and transferred in them. And therefore, transferring an embryo in a postmenopausal woman and getting her pregnant is much more difficult than getting an embryo transferred in a woman that is 22 years old and she's at her prime and is ready to get pregnant. So that has been our problem. But we're going to solve that problem by going into phase 2 and phase 3 where we can accept more younger people in the program and going through it. So to me, I think that after you transfer embryos in a woman, the next thing that is going to happen is a pregnancy. And then when you get a woman pregnant, then you're more likely going to deliver a baby 9 months thereafter.
Is that your intention?
Yes, it is our intention because I think that from the beginning we said that we're going to assist in getting people that have no other access or have no other options or reproducing than that. Those are the restrictions that we place on our patients and applicants that participate in our program.
How would you react to the situation that if you were to do that in the United Kingdom, you'd be arrested because it's illegal?
It is illegal in England, but it's not illegal in the U.S. or other locations.
I was asking you if you understood why in this country what you're doing is considered to be too far.
Well, I understand a lot of things, and therefore I think that everybody has their own opinion.
Dr. Zavos, can I ask you, in view of the fact that so many cloned animals, such as sheep and calves and pigs, have actually had enormous health problems, you know, poor cardiovascular systems, poor urinary systems, problems with their breathing, and very compromised immune systems, how do you feel about possibly creating humans that have similar problems?
Well, you know, a scientist tried to tell me that I am incapable of cloning mice, and therefore, how dare you do that in the humans? And my answer to that is that we are not really very eager to debate that scientist's incompetence, because we're simply Very simply, each species is different from each other. We know more about human reproduction since Louis Brown was born in 1978 than any other species all combined. And therefore, we've been creating in vitro babies for since 1978. We have not been creating in vitro babies in the cattle or the sheep or the goats or the dogs or the coyotes or any other species. Therefore, we know more about humans than any other species. And therefore, I think that because we do that, I think that it would be the easiest species to clone. However, it's the most serious aspect, and we take that very seriously about doing that. And that's why we really have not done it as yet. We need to think and go back and rethink things, because very simply we take the necessary precautions when we create a human being, whether it's an in vitro baby or an ICSI baby or a whatever baby that might be, in bringing to this world a healthy child. And I've been doing that for 37 years.
So you consider the science of cloning, with all its unknowns, with all the problems we've had with cloning mammals and the low success rate and the difficulties, you consider the science to be mature enough to clone humans?
If you let the unknowns remain unknowns, there will always remain unknowns. But if you consider the fact that, this is a new world that we need to go forward with, I think that the unknowns can be knowns if you investigate them properly and you get them to become knowns instead of remaining unknown.
And just a reminder, you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London, and today we're discussing cloning. And I'm joined in the studio by Barbara Prainsack, Professor of Sociology and Politics of Bioscience at Brunel University, Joyce D'Silva, former CEO of Compassion in World Farming. On the line we have Dr. David Whitehouse, a science journalist and author, as well as Dr. Panayotis Zavos from the Andrology Institute of America. Barbara, you wanted to come in here at this point.
I think what I like about the discussion so far is that, although I disagree with Dr. Zavos with regard to the necessity to experiment with this despite all the health and safety concerns, but what is good about the discussion is that it focuses on health and safety concerns and does not use some of the conventional arguments that have been used against human reproductive cloning at the level of principles. I'm not in favor of human cloning. I don't see the point of it. However, I think that some of the reasons that have been used against it are actually a bit dangerous, because they could be used against people who are among us today. So the conventional reasons are that producing two people with identical makeups interferes with nature, and that people who have an identical set of DNA with someone else would be less of an individual than other people, or that interfering with reproduction is playing God. And I think each of those arguments are very problematic, and as I think it was already apparent when I mentioned those reasons, some of those could be used against identical twins. And Dr. Whitehouse has said that identical twins are, in a way, cloned, in quotation marks, in the sense that they share their DNA with each other, and they're certainly fully fledged individuals. The difference between identical twins and clones would, of course, be that if human cloning ever became a reality, I don't personally think it will, that human clones wouldn't be born at the same time, which would not raise some of the issues that identical twins suffer from, being constantly compared to each other, but it would probably raise other psychological issues. So I think, to sum up, we need to keep a couple of kinds of arguments apart. The health and safety related ones that I think are very, very valid. The ones about possible psychological issues that these technologies may bring about. And then the very abstract arguments that argue with God and nature and other things that are not so useful and potentially even harmful for our societal discussion. And I think it all boils down to the question of what kind of society do we want.
I think that this is a conscious question that needs to be addressed by the individual that is willing to undergo this process. This obviously, in dealing with this problem, I spoke with my friend Robert Edwards, that created Louise Brown, the first test tube baby, and this very same question, very same arguments came to play at Oxford Union and elsewhere that I participated in debates before. And therefore, the world today is dealing with millions of IVF babies born from a process that it was as unnatural as any. And therefore, I think that the world is ready for things to come, and that we deal with it as we go along, because those are new and probably better modalities for people that do not have any other options.
Joyce, you wanted to come in at that point.
About 4 or 5 years ago, the European Commission's Advisory Group on Science and New Technologies, it's a group of ethicists from around Europe, held a consultation on animal cloning, and they decided that there was no justification for cloning animals for food. Now, they reached that conclusion because...
Sorry, Dr. Zavos, if I could ask you to let Joyce finish her point.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go right ahead.
They reached that conclusion on the basis of the amount of suffering that was currently being caused to the animals involved in cloning experiments, and the ones who were born having, all these multiple health problems. And as we know, the general technique, the success rate has not improved since then. So if it's not fit to be done in farm animals for food, then I find it hard to see that you think it could be okay to extend that further. I mean, I would say it shouldn't even be done for animals for food. We don't need it.
Barbara, you're nodding your head in what I can only assume is agreement.
I agree with Joyce. I do not agree with the argument about nature that Dr. Whitehouse made earlier. I think I'm saying that something should be opposed on the grounds of it being unnatural or being far removed from procedures that go on in nature. I think that's a problematic argument because so many things and so much progress has been achieved that was initially criticized as being unnatural, and this exact same thing happened with IVF. However, I think the health and safety concerns with regard to cloning, and I fully agree with Joyce here, are so significant at the moment with regard to animals that my personal approach to this is that we shouldn't attempt it with humans. And we could argue, when in doubt, then for freedom, and people, if they knowingly go into this, they should have this procedure done. But then I would wonder what responsibility people who help such problem-ridden procedures to materialize, what responsibilities they feel towards society and the well-being of society and the world's pressing problems.
We accept the responsibilities that go along with our work, of course, and we obey the rules and regulations. I think that just like any other procedure, like the in vitro, and I'm using the IVF as a good example because about 35 years ago, Robert Edwards was told the same kind of an argument and I spoke with Robert Edwards quite many times, that he was told that he was going to create monsters in a petri dish. And actually, one of the gentlemen that brought that argument is Lord Winston, a very well-known figure in England that I debated at Oxford Union. And today, ironically enough, the Lord Winston is known as Mr. IVF in England. So this is quite hypocritical for people to say things just because they feel that way. But I think that the world is evolving, the science is evolving. The world is ready for clone animals and humans.
No, it's not.
Therefore, I think it's a matter of time this happening.
I don't think you've got a logical position there in the sense. I know Bob Winston. I know Dr. Edwards. I've known them for many years, and they've had great success with IVF. But just because that is a successful technique does not imply that you have demonstrated that this more advanced and more difficult technique is going to be successful or is safe. You cannot just say because one thing is safe, this is similar, therefore it is going to be safe. It's not similar. It's very different.
Exactly.
And I think it's worrying to me that what you're doing is considered by so many scientists, Lord Winston and others like them, not only in this country, but in the European Union and in the United States, that what you are doing is considered so unethical as to be legislated in law as to be illegal. And you have to go around the various countries in the world which do not have an advanced legal structure to prevent this, to carry out your research.
Why not? Obviously, I mean, you don't want me to go in a country where the laws are such that they prevent me from doing something. This is a logical way of going about doing things. Because we're simply, if it's illegal to drink alcohol in Saudi Arabia, then I don't drink alcohol in Saudi Arabia. I wait until I go to Ireland and I get drunk. So, you need to understand here that you need to play the rules as the game prevails, and that's just the way it is done.
The world's most advanced medical countries are United States and are Europe. They are head and shoulders above any other country in terms of clinical progress, in terms of understanding problems, and in terms of legislation. And what they say is that what you're doing is illegal.
Dr. Zavos.
No. Let me correct you on that, because I live in the U.S. and I know that it is not illegal in the U.S. to clone a human being. Please understand that there's no law that is signed by the President of the United States that says just that. Okay, so please do not misguide the world here that is listening to us that it is illegal to do that in the U.S. because it is not.
I think our argument so far has been that it's illegal in some countries and it's considered unethical in most countries. And if you're a very talented scientist and researcher, Dr. Zavos, why don't you put your talent to solving problems that may benefit more people in the world, and maybe people...
I do that every day. That's not the only thing that I do. I've been helping people become parents for 37 years using various techniques that I developed, and obviously that cloning happens to be just a minute part of my research efforts during the last 37 years. But you need to understand that the world evolves and science evolves, and that's part of the evolution.
Unfortunately, cloning seems to be a science which is not evolving, because the success rates are not improving. So it does seem to be a fairly redundant technology, which, in my view, shouldn't be applied to animals that we might eat. And, I would seriously question that it should be applied to humans either.
Today, we clone animals, domestic species, for food and for milk commercially today in the U.S. If you want your cow or your bull to be cloned, you take them to a center and they'll clone it for you for a fee. And that is commercially acceptable. And the success rate of cloning cattle today is almost 80%.
I find that hard to believe.
Well, I'll send you an email as soon as we get off the air here to report to you.
Well, that is not what the latest scientific papers are saying. They're talking about 10% success rates.
Are you talking about artificial twinning?
40 minutes yet. If we had 2 hours, I'd be happy to cite you with that, because basically I'm not going to cite now references on the air with obviously confusing the public. I can only tell you that the commercialization of cloning those species exists in the U.S.
Dr. Zavos, you said that cloning is not illegal in the United States, but surely it is illegal in some states.
The law has never been challenged in states. It has to be a federal law.
But it is illegal in some states to clone a human being.
Well, I happen to know those states, but like I said, the law, you see, just like the immigration law in the U.S., the federal government dictates those laws, and therefore the states can legislate, but there's never been a challenge of the state laws at the federal level.
Dr. Zavos, you are talking like a slippery lawyer and not a scientist.
No. I need to be aware of the law, sir. That's why I am not an attorney. I never claim to be, but I have to be aware of the laws, and therefore you need to understand that part of my education is understanding the laws of the land.
So your point of view is that you want to do this, and although many scientists and in many countries consider this to be unethical and illegal, you'll tout your opinions and techniques around until you find a place which will let you.
I have many places to go to. And I need to let the world know that I'm not doing this in the U.S. So please understand that, although it is legal to do it in the U.S., we do none of our work in the USA.
And unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. May I say thank you to all my guests: Barbara Prainsack, Professor of Sociology and the Politics of Bioscience at Brunel University; Joyce D'Silva, former CEO of Compassion in World Farming and now one of their ambassadors; and on the line we had Dr. David Whitehouse, a science journalist and author, as well as Dr. Panayotis Zavos from the Andrology Institute of America. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Tom Hedegard. Stay tuned, we'll be back after the news.